Good Shabbos.
I was here yesterday, David. I met with Stephen Kirby. He has 3 operations, over parts of the region. And he's done two programs. Experience. That's how so what I told him, I'm going to want him to see our facility. So we met yesterday around 10:30. And I don't know if he was talking to somebody in the room, he was coming out. 6. Okay, he's up there. So I got out and he kept getting out. Get out. And it had nothing to do with anything, but it was just rock, he asked all the questions. He gave me some general ideas that his question is really right in line with he said that average for every day with the clay box.
In other words, you can, if you want, the very important parts.
Yeah, but if you could go anything from the box.
Well, I do know that they just feel wrong, doesn't look like another thing, doesn't go for the plain part.
That's right. That's what you're good.
Right.
No matter, it's all good.
Right. Whereas again, they look on get you the all wooden parts.
Yes.
They're fancy.
Right. Oh, sure.
Because I happen to like.
I always get asked, why, I would tell them that before to good place. But they said, all men, everything comes with barely with plain ours, and so he said, that's not that must be what I understood it to be, so we're there. We went to the cemetery, we went to the rock. He said, cemetery, we were there. All the regular,
Oh, yeah.
you can trip, carrying it on to you, this is right, where you get to the where you were going.
Well, of course, they fix it out also in the past couple of years.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you go down to the large cemetery, American cemetery, and it's like that, it's all, there's just no room left in there anymore.
So anyway, we talked with me, he and I talked about that, like, you knew about this, and I told you last time about this.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And I was doing something with him.
Yeah.
We had gotten together, but how did we get together now? All I said, I don't think. Well, it's even so much. Oh.
Yeah.
It is a weird dog. I love it.
That usually got,
That Thursday. Oh, wow. Well, it's in the morning.
well, she hasn't announced it yet.
No, I'm not going to. This is very weird. Okay. I said, he's been down. He left last week. She's very explicit in his other subject. Jacob was one of the bigger things.
Right.
They, some of them call me 5 years.
Oh, you mean that?
On both sides.
Oh, yeah.
On both sides. We can make sense.
Right.
Regular.
Oh, yeah. That's the same family as Roberta.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So anyway, Stephen was diagnosed with cancer about a year ago. We didn't tell anybody, we didn't want anybody to know, and now they took it. So they called me and I went to council. They told me it's in the system. No issue. No announcements. It's in the announcement. Who doesn't want anybody? The immediate change, the funeral, and she was.
Right, everybody. They'll take care of
Requested,
whatever.
Right.
Right. They're gonna take care of whatever we're gonna take care of, just as that.
And everything, he had already made arrangements with his boss, with the funeral, so the son just got over the eyes and questioned, he called and said, how do we get this plot? I said, well, you choose the plot, you share plots.
Oh, no, just got all these boxes from the river.
So he actually went down there and
Yep, that piece of money.
and picked a spot.
Right, I'll go for that.
Exactly right. So that's, then I said to myself, if all of this hadn't been prearranged, we should have really had anybody on tap. Well, I mean, we could refer him, but still, we had nobody that I had confidence in, and I knew.
Right. No, again, you could just, somebody said, put out the reviews, you know, it's awesome.
So I called, this guy, Rudy, that was Thursday, and I heard from, Celebrate, so I called Rudy on Friday, who came right down. We met him on, Sunday, 10:30, and we were, he knew about the commission, but we said it has to be here.
At their place. Right, they haven't used the application.
Also, some flaws.
In the wall. Oh. Right.
But it's big.
Right, as long as it still has growth inside the vault itself. I thought at one point it was almost a requisite so that the things would not start caving in.
State has rules. I would say, all this, but if you ask all of our questions, all of our answers, I feel very good.
Maybe something should be written up for the next whole Israel.
But I wanted him to meet the rabbi wasn't here. I left a message for him. I'll see him today, and just give him the chat. When I came in, the door was locked, but the alarm was not set. At 10:30, yesterday morning.
Well, that would probably deal with the heating measures. It's still not done yet.
Okay,
Not done.
I thought there was nobody here.
Now, you look at that at 10:30. in the morning. Well, Christine obviously is not here at that time. She comes in at noon and a little after noon, right?
Exactly.
So again, they set it up to allow.
So when I left, I did not set that up.
And I do believe the meeting guys wasn't working. No combination to the box with the key is here. That's how they did it.
Right,
So
so
again, I've noticed in this morning, I tried to get in by the keypad and it's both glitching in right now. For whatever reason. So I don't know why. Again, if you look on the side door there, it says to get in, call this number. I don't know whose number that is.
yeah, I struggled with the kid.
Oh, but again, I got the key on, so again, I use the keypad, and I haven't had problems with that for the past
No.
year. It's been a problem.
It was
I
troubling.
didn't get effect. Again, once I saw that, I went downstairs, there was one time, last winter, that the same thing happened, it wasn't working at all, there was no power to it at all. And somebody downstairs, on a Friday night, turned the system off. We were trying to turn the lights off, and downstairs, the spotlights downstairs, and they
In the
turned.
box. In
In the box.
breaker box.
But instead of using the actual push buttons, they
Yeah.
turned on the spotlights. They tripped the box,
Yeah, yeah.
which is actually one of the lower boxes. They tripped that, and that actually, the keypad system to get in, is hooked up to that box. They
Do
turned it off.
you know if there's power to it?
There's no power to it now.
But it's still not.
Right. Even though I went downstairs and I looked at the actual box that runs the unit, I can't do it. And I noticed that the plug is not, and I tried to push it even further in. It could be, even though the Wi-Fi still works right now, because we're doing,
Oh, that's right.
like, casting. And in fact, I looked up my phone's Wi-Fi, I said, Wi-Fi is working, but there might be something else going on. But again, I was also doing my good side focus. And the board in the chapel, the left-hand board, is off, no power at all.
Right now.
No, there's power now. So I went downstairs and I noticed that somebody flipped the switch from that board, or that board flipped its own switch. I've never seen that before. Again, I flipped it back
Do you
on.
think it's these guys?
It could be doing things, yes.
That's what I mean. I don't think dealing with electrical.
I do know I was here, not yesterday, but the previous Friday, to take care of my real estate. And the guys would be working, doing whatever. And they did ask me, because you can hear these, this side going.
Yes.
That side's not going.
And then they
For whatever reason, again, they were asking me about the fans on those two, you can hear the fans.
Yeah.
And that one back there, the fans have been broken for years.
Oh, really? Okay.
I keep telling people about it, nothing happens about it. But for whatever reason, this fan is not working. They asked me about this, he says, that fan working? The fan, he says, this one has been working. That one's been off, broken, for a number of years. And I told people about it. But this one's not working now, yes, so again, if it was only as a temple, the motors are probably common. It says if they're temperature sensitive, and once you reach a certain temperature, they come on. This is, yes, you can hear that switch, it's switching on, it's not coming on anymore. It's more than likely, the motor's not.
And that's, by the way, how I thought they were, is that they don't blow air, it's just the air out.
That's right. Okay, you can feel the heat that's coming out of the units.
So I don't know if they tell you anything about making both of those functional.
Well, I told them that you report that to Jeff.
Yes.
Went to Jeff and tell him what's going on. He said, it's pretty simple, because again, you know, the pumps. But, because he says, you can simply go over to this company inside of town. Fay Electric Motors. His name, F-A-Y, know about them, they see their address wrong. They can replace the motors.
Right.
if they don't have the motors, they could actually rewire the motor. I mean,
Sure.
is it 12, Jeff, directly about what you're doing? Again, I noticed that downstairs, they still don't have this side working yet. Even though this side was working the last time. We might have some problems. We have not, might be trying to leave the air out of the system when they still get the
So they're not capable of installing their ballpark to actually deal with electric motors and things.
That's what I've been.
That's what you said.
Even though they are not hired.
Yeah, yeah, they never did, but,
They're not hired to actually do that. They're looking to tell them, okay, but this one said, keep talking to Jeff about it. I can't tell you the fix it, I'm not.
yeah. But, what you just said, there are several companies, several companies who are specializing in electric motors.
Yeah.
Really from the ones at the factories that are 5 feet long, to the
Oh, yeah, the discovery is around it.
they build it or whatever.
In fact, if they look at it and if they don't see, you don't have the actual number, they can find out something from retrofit. Right, I'm sure they're little basic numbers.
Yeah. All right.
In fact, it has I said, no.
But that explains to me what I was concerned why the job was not set when I came in. Yesterday.
But the same thing would be today. When I came in this morning, so you could keep it in. The alarm was not set.
Right. And I didn't say
And
that
I'm
left because I figured there
I'm
might
running
be
lights
something.
on, I'm running lights on, all over.
Yeah.
In fact, now
All right.
we have a new heat, new gear. You can't turn it off. Once you turn it off, and running. Then if you turn it off, some, you do yourself, you turn the system off. But during the winter, you never turn it off. We make sure that we have a temperature set, no lower than 50, it's down to forced hot water system, as opposed to steam. Steam, when you turn it off, it just drains itself.
Right.
It freezes. Now that we have water, it is, it's a different problem here.
Oh, right, exactly.
Well,
Well,
but
but
freeze
we're
the system.
going to have to get a tutorial for anybody who may have anything to do with this, because that's where you get trouble. But
Well,
for example, Michael City comes in and says, oh, geez, we don't need this, and shuts it off, but nobody told him.
Right.
That's not okay, you know what I mean?
Well, again, what we'll do is we're still using the same controller back there.
Yes.
Just wind it up. We'll just put a little sign there, do not touch. Do not turn the heat off between this and this.
Sure.
It's between, let's just say from, 1st of November to the 1st of April. Don't ever shut this off.
Shalom. We are going to get rolling here. It's a good day to warm ourselves up with some davening and singing. Page 81, Psalm 30. Mizmoshir, Hanabay David. Page 83. You rise or remain standing for beginning of Sukkot Zimra and Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar B'haya Ha'olam Baruch Hu. Yachid Chelamim Al-Mashvah V'Meshkoch HaGachol Baruch Adonai Melech Tishmachot. See there? 84. Oh, the language of Hallelujah.
I don't know. That's what she said. Now that right, feels like
God being merciful grants atonement for sin and does not disapprove. Page 90, Psalm 91. Yoshem et Elyon et Al Shaddai Yitzmona no Maru.
that's good. We should probably update Ruth also.
Yes.
Page 92, Psalm 136, the Hallel Haggadah. Oh, the Nike Tov, Kiliam Pastor. Oh, the Levi, Kiliam Pastor. Oh, the Arne, Kiliam Pastor. Page Psalm 92, the Psalm for Shabbat. Is more shir yom ha-Shabbat, oh, Six lines up from the bottom in the Hebrew. So you cut them off. Page 96 and 97, Ashrei. Ashrei, Yoshevet Okay, jag har masker på här sånt så gick rätt på att ha fått massa. Page 100, Psalm 150. Hallelujah, 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 You redeemed us from the house of bondage, you delivered us. Now paragraph 105, 4 full lines up from the bottom. That's the second word from the left. Give them a lot. Shachrit, the formal beginning to the Shachrit service, the morning service, begins with Shokanah, middle of 1 through 5. O Page 107, we skip the Kaddish and the Professor Kaddish and our food. They are sans minyan at the moment. Beginning with the first sentence after our food on 107. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yosef or uvarech osher, moshe shalom u're'etzachnu.
Harry and Michael Dana. You know anybody else?
There was definitely Mitch. You just listen.
Oh, Yisrael ve'ahava El Melech Ne'eman Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha V'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher Anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'levatam v'shiktecha v'beitecha v'lechtecha v'derech v'shoftecha v'kumecha v'shartam la'ot ha'yedecha v'hayu l'totefot v'eineinecha v'okavtam Amazon v'techa v'visharecha v'hayu Yishbana. Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeti etchem me'eret Mitzrayim, לחיות לכם אלוהים, אני Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem, and middle of 113. It's Silent Amidah begins on 115A or B, your choice. It continues on through page 120, after which you may add your own personal private supplications. We may also use this time as personal meditative reflection. we're finished davening, you may be seated. Right. We are still sans minyan, however. Nothing says that we can't study a little Torah, study a little bit of learning. And here. So. People coming? I could be hallucinating. All right, we're gonna continue. We're gonna do a little Torah study here. We're gonna continue on, guys. We're gonna do a little Torah study. As per here. Oh, we do have 10? Awesome. All right. Number 10 has just arrived, so we'll be continuing Torah service on 139 momentarily. Woo-hoo. As soon as we get everybody back in here, we can continue.
Like herding cats.
It is. We were at 9. Michael comes in, 3 people leave. Out there. All right, we are going to continue, guys, with the Torah service on page 139. Need not rise till the ark is open. Rise as the earth is open. There they are.
I in sorrow by Gomer Moshe Gomai Yamustu Eveta Yamustu Misalecha Ihanecha Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu Adon Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Echad Eloheinu Adon Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Rom Mashem Mohoyah Adonai Hagedurah Hagedurah Hagiferet Hanetzach V'Kavod Kivod HaShamayim U'Ba'al Kol HaShamayim Mubarak. Adonai Amamaha, V'hani Naseh Le'chol Elosh, Romenu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'shachanu, L'Adon Rabban Shadosh, Romenu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'shachanu,
May you be seated. All right, we are in the second parasha of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. We are doing our abridged reading. So we are going to begin in the blue Hertz Chumash. The readings for this week come from Exodus chapter 7, beginning with verse 8, which is found on page 236, right in the middle of the column there. So we're getting to the nitty-gritty of the show, the ongoing showdowns between Moses and Aaron on one side and Pharaoh and his cohort on the other. Page 236, middle of the column, starting with verse 8.
Yisrael Yogin Yoshia, the cloth of his bow, Shema, Amen.
Amen.
Hakol Azul B'Gel Elohim, the Jews are over to us. In Kai Kohen Yahod, Menachem Ben Yisrael Halevi Benika, B'Kom Kohen. Rosh Hashanah, Yemon Yisrael B'Tushatah. Rabbeinu Harav Yahu Ben Amam B'Zerah Sheni. That's me.
The second Aliyah is still on 236, verses 11 through 13. Chapter 7, verses 11 through 13.
Baruch Adonai HaMorah.
Baruch Adonai Baed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'karban mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
ויקרא ככל החכמים ולמחשבים, ויעשו גם עדן חמוצים ולתתיהם, ולהתיהם מפיהם, ויצליחו וישמטלו, ויתנו לתנאים, ויבלע התיאבון את מטותיהם, ויפסק לקרוא שמעתם, אשר תפאר
Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Ya'amod Shalom Velfa Ben Avram Chaim Shlishi.
Sweetie.
The third Aliyah is found on page 237, verses 14 through 16.
Baruch Adonai
ויאמר משה כבד אל פרעה מעין תפילת החכם לקל כבוד ויוצא הלילה ויצאת יפתו על שפת פרעה ולמטה אשר נתן לך שתיקת ידך במקרנה אדוני אלוהי שלחם אליך לראות שלחת בי ויעבדו לי במזבח
Ruach HaKadosh, Kahin Shekamanu Torah, Chaolam HaTachinu, Ruach HaKadosh, Tila Torah.
Ya'amod Moshe Ben Nutan Levi.
The fourth Aliyah, and on 237, Exodus chapter 7, verses 17 through 19.
And
כה אמר אדוני בזאת תדע כי אני אדוני לאנוכי גידי כפה במטה אשר בידי על המים אשר ביום ונפקו בדם ועבד גם אשר ביום ואשריו מנהיגו מצרים, לשתות מים הירוקות, ואדוני משה, הם לא לבוא, מתחרה, ולידך, ויצחק החיים, ונבותם, ויאוריהם, ועל כל מקדמיהם, ויהודם, ויעדם כל ארץ מצרים, ויציבו חכמים.
Amen.
Yashayahu Ben-Nullah,
The Fifth Aliyah, 230, begins at 237, verse 20, and goes on to the next page, 238, through verse 22.
Baruch Adonai HaMavarach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavarach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavarach. Baruch Adonai HaMavarach. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachoranu mikol ha'amim, v'natananu et torato. Baruch Adonai notein haTorah.
ויסופם שבארון כאשר ציווה אדוני, וירם במטה ויחד המים אשר בירום לדקחו לביעתה, ויפלו כל המים אשר בירום לתאה, והדגה אשר בירום לתאה, ויבשלו, ולא יפלו מצרים משנות מים מן הירוק, וירדם כל ארץ מצרים, ויעשו כן חפתם למצרים, ולתיהם, ויחזק לקרוב ולא שמר עליהם, כאשר דיבר אדוני.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachoranu Torah emet l'chayim olam, notar melechenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Be seated. Those who are standing. We are going to take a pause now from Misha Barak for the holy, for those who are ill in need of healing. And then we will sing together the David Friedman and Misha Barak. I have my list of names here. If there's anyone else who any of you have in mind who is not on this list, when I'm done reading the list of names I have here, please rise in your place if you can, or raise your hand, and I'll come around the room and I point to you. You can add your additional names. We're asking for healing for Andy and Jan, Judy Kennedy, Marianne Griffin, Adasa Bat Abraham Masara, Lee Bat Golda, Revelea Bat Shmuel Yisrael, Lisa Ranella, Ellie Goldberg, Chana Michaela Bat Yocheved, Eliezer Akiva Ben Tova, Dovan Herschel, William Griffin Jr., Arav, David Eliezer Ben Wendell, Jamie Largent, Ami Weiss, Mike Howar, Gene Ellman, Mark Goldberg, Patrick Murphy, Jonathan Lake, Ben Simakita, Rav Yitzchak Itamar Ben Schenkel, Lauren Lara, and Rob Kugler.
Little Robbie Summers, Frank Case.
Anyone else? Any other names? Anyone? All right. Please sing along.
May our hearts have strength, bless the ones before us, help us find the courage, make our lives a blessing, and let us stay Amen. Visheleva imotenu, Nikor habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
May they have a refuah shlema, a speedy complete healing of mind, body, and soul. And as always, we ask the Holy One to tend to those who tend to them. Also, it wasn't on the list here as well, but I'm blanking on her name, but Ruth Zach's mother is not doing well, so she's asked to have her added to the list as well. So I had her in mind as we were saying that. Well, we are going to continue now with the Sixth Aliyah, which is found on page 238, Exodus chapter 7, verses 23 through 25.
יעמוד נדב בן אברהם בצורה שישי.
Baruch Adonai ha'am borach.
Baruch Adonai ha'am
borach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'karban mikol ha'ami, atanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Baruch Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah edet, v'chayil olam notah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
יעמוד יהושע בן ימן שביעי.
Seventh Aliyah, back in chapter 7, so from verse 26 on page 238. From the Blue Hearts Passage.
Baruch Adonai Torah.
Baruch Adonai
Always wonderful to hear your voice cleaning for us.
Are you doing Haka?
Ya'amod, Yaakov and Jerusalem, Mashiach. Ya'amod, Elohim Shlomo, Hagolel. Please rise to the living line of the sacred Torah. This goes around both. All right.
Yeah, I should go.
As soon as the sacred Torah is set back down, you may be seated. Oh yeah. Starters. The Haftarah, which by the way, the word Haftarah is not Haftorah, it's Haftarah. It's from the same root as mosque here. Is taken from the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 29, we're in verses 1 through 12, and that is going to begin on page 245.
I was reading, there's some connections with Egypt in this author as well, but in a more modern Babylonian exile time frame.
Exactly, yes. Ezekiel uses the Egyptian imagery to great effect to talk about what's going on in these contemporary circumstances. So again, page 245, Ezekiel chapter 29, verses 1 to 12.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'minim tovim v'ratzah b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'Moshe abdo u'Yisrael amo u'niyeh hamed b'tzedek.
Amen.
Bashana Asiri, Bishne Masar Lachodesh, Hayad Gardenai, El Manemor, Ben Adam, Shin Paneha, Al Paro, Melech Mitzrayim, V'hinave Alav, Ve'al Mitzrayim, Uva. Daber ve'amarta, O Amar Adonai Elohim, Hineni Alecha, Paro melech Mitzrayim, Hatanim Hagadol ve'rodet, V'to Yorah, Asher Amar Li'ori ve'ani asiti. Venatati chachim bilchayecha v'hidabakti degat georecha devas kistecha Ika, Mito, Yoreha, Pe, Kol de God, Yoreha, Bekasoteha, Tibak, Untashticha, Hamidabara, Ostape, Kol de God, Yoreha, Alpne, Hasadeti, Kol, Lo te aset, lo ti karet, lechayat haaretz, lo hashamayim, netati le'aflaha, vayedu koyoshbe mitzrayim, ki yanyanai, yan heyotam, Vishet kamet Israel. Betavsham, Bekah, Terot, Ubakatam Lahem, Kolkatem, Uhishanam Alecha, Tishaber, Lahe ko amar Adonai Elohim hineni Nevi alai charek V'hifrati mimeh Adam ukemah V'haika Eretz Mitzrayim Vishmama v'charba v'yadu Ki ani Adonai amar Ye'orli v'ani asiti Lahen Hineni elecha ve'ye'orecha V'natati Eretz Mitzrayim Lecharoho Oreshit Shemama V'migdol Sevene V'akebush Lo Ta'arba Regel Adam V'regel Behema Lo Ta'arba V'lo Teshev Arba'im Shana V'natati Eretz Mitzrayim Shemama V'tochar Tzog Mishamo V'areha V'tov Arim Mafarabot Tienach Shemama Arba'im Shana Be'afitzoti Et Mitzrayim Ve'goyim Ve'zeritim Ba'aratzos Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Zerko Elohim Zadik V'kol Hadorot Ne'eman Omer V'yoseh Hamda V'Rikayin Shekol V'Barah V'Medratzeh Ne'eman Atahu Adonai Eloheinu Ne'emanim V'Varecha V'Varecha V'Lo Yashuv Recha Yom Ne'eman V'Chavanaka Baruch Atah Adonai Ha'eloheinu V'Kol V'Barah
Amen.
Rachem Otziaki V'Kainu V'Alu V'Nefesh Toshiyah V'Mirav Yameinu Baruch Atah Adonai V'Savei Hasiyom V'Amen
Amen.
Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu V'Eliyahu Hanavi Adecha U'Malchu V'David Neshitecha V'Mirayavo V'Yagel V'Inu Al Kisa Lo Yeshiv Zar V'Lo Yichalu V'Charim V'Kavodo Yibishen Kashakani Shvatalo, Shelo, Yipen, Rola Nampa, and Barukata, the nine.
Amen. Yes, right.
Figure you should go up the mini.
Okay, see that by the way, we went to those, it was applied to flag, bumping. Nothing, idiosyncrasy.
Who's there?
Don't have to.
Establish special, we will go out.
Amen.
You don't want to go through things, and we want to say, like songs, we come to start to talk with Israel. The Lord is not to leave, we move.
Amen. 151 to 152. Ashrei. Ashrei, Shebetzavod, Yadu Chasavod. We rise as the Sefer Torah is taken up, the ark is open for the turning of the Sefer Torah. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Kizkav Shemo Levato. Orev Sheshamari, Ayaren Keren Meyamo, Tehimalecho, Asilo, Nidyen Israel Amro, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Mizmor David, Abu Adonai Bnei, Abu Adonai Palos, Abu Adonai Moshe, Yishach Adonai Kodesh. $154. Nice job. Nicely done. Right. Anyone who's ever tried to open or close that thing, by the way, knows the strength that it takes to
Yeah.
get that pulley to go. So good job. All right.
Action-packed parsha.
Action-packed parsha. Lots going on here. Massive showdown. And our section actually, we started off with the end of the showdown between the Pharaoh's sorcerers, wizards, whatever you want to call them, and Moses and Aaron. We had the Pharaoh's sorcerers cast down their staffs, and they all turned to snakes. And Aaron said, "Oh yeah." It's basically the biblical version of saying, "That's not a knot. This is a knot." Throws down his staff, turns into a bigger serpent, and eats all of theirs. Thank you. Thank you. Australian accents are actually very hard to pull off successfully. And there's different ones, too.
That was just on TV.
It's a great movie. Crocodile Dundee. 80s classic. Yes, Paul Hogan, single-handedly responsible for the Australian craze and obsession of all things therein in the 1980s, albeit as brief as it was. There's a great line in there where he and his lady love are out walking in New York City. He's a country boy from the outback of Australia. They get held up at night point by a would-be mugger, pulls a little switchblade. His girlfriend goes, give him the money. He goes, what? He's got a knife. That's not a knife. He pulls out this giant Bowie knife and goes, that's a knife. The guy runs off screaming after he slices his jacket up. So, well worth a watch. And the line has applications in many different aspects of life. So after that, we got to the first of the plagues, which was the plague of what? Because we're getting to that season actually.
Done.
What is dumb? Good. Dumb. So the first plague is blood. And what specifically about the plague? How does blood factor in there?
Well, it doesn't allow the Nile, which is a source of life, to be used.
Exactly. What made that region of Egypt? Remember, this is the region where Jacob, and his family fled while Joseph was the vizier of Egypt under that pharaoh. They fled there because there was a famine brought on by drought in the land of Canaan, which is dependent solely on rain and dew and any kind of moisture they can get from the sky. So there was a drought, and having lived in Southern California for 4 years, I can tell you that in an area that is very much dependent on the weather for for alleviating things like drought and making sure that the crops have plenty of water, and also making sure that people have plenty of water to drink, because it is no fun to be on rationing for water. The city, when I was living there, the city of Beverly Hills actually got demanded by the state of California, because while everybody else was rationing water, the city of Beverly Hills was watering their lawns all they wanted, because they thought, because of Beverly Hills, they can do whatever they want, and the state came down and said, we're going to make it not worth your while to do this anymore, so turn off your sprinklers like everybody else and let your lawns go brown, like a good citizen, and they did. So in Egypt, they had the Nile, and they still have the Nile, it's still there. And that was the source of, has anyone ever seen like a satellite image of that region of Egypt from space? So what does it look like? What is it?
A V.
It's a V of what?
It's a marsh,
Exactly. So it's green, right?
Yeah.
You got this. You can tell where the Nile runs if you get to the river, because you can see this river of green snaking up, and you get to the Nile Delta, and it, as the name Delta implies, it kind of starts branching out in a triangle formation. So that most people were situated along the Nile. And also, such as they were in ancient Mesopotamia, they would situate themselves, the cities and towns were situated along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Which is why, by the way, many different ancient cultures, because they needed to situate themselves along a body of fresh water of some sort so they could survive, have some sort of flood myth or narrative in their collective cultural history. So the flood narrative that we have in the Torah is somewhat reminiscent of an earlier narrative in Sumerian and Mesopotamian lore, mythology. Only this is the tale of Pishtim and this great flood that happens in that culture. And so instead of Noah, it's a guy named Pishtim, and it's a very parallel journey. So the fact that the Nile would be undrinkable, unusable. You couldn't use it to water your crops. You couldn't use it to drink. You couldn't use it to water your animals. So it has a snowball effect. So this was not just some minor thing. It wasn't like the city of Boston where they put green dye in the river, and or in Chicago they do their river, where they color the rivers for St. Patrick's Day. This has actually made the water undrinkable. So now think about the scene involved with that. How did it come about? Did God just turn the river into blood? Who uses the staff? Aaron. Aaron does it, yes. Yeah, you would have thought Moses did it, because normally it was Moses' staff, but actually, the way it works out is Moses is the one saying this is going to happen. You're going to turn the water to blood, but it's Aaron who actually strikes the river with the staff, and the river turns to blood. Now, why is that? Why might that be significant? And we're kind of getting into some commentary territory.
I remember learning that Moshe didn't want to curse the Nile because it saved his life.
Yes, that is one of the teachings that is out there. So Rashi points that out. I think Rashi's drawing a midrash which says the reason why Moses wasn't the one to actually take the staff and strike the river and cause the plague of blood to begin was because Moses he had a sense of gratitude towards the Nile River, because when he was a baby, his mom placed him in the little ark and sealed him up and put him down the Nile, and the river, in a way, kind of saved his life. It protected him. And so Moses didn't want to be the one to curse it. He couldn't be the one to touch it because he wanted to show his gratitude, so his brother had to do it instead. Now, there's a parallel story that comes in the next chapter, where such is the case as well. Chapter 8, I believe it's in verse 12. Let me see if I'm right. Chapter 8, verse 12, yes. Vaymer Adonai el Moshe, and Adonai said to Moses, say to Aaron, so tell Aaron again, hold out your rod and strike the dust of the earth, and it shall turn to lice throughout the land of Egypt. This is the plague of Pini, the lice, the parasites, the furthering of the creepy crawlies that will infest man and beast alike. So again, God tells Moses to tell Aaron to actually do the physical aspect of bringing about the curse, this time of lice. So why, and this is going back to Rashi, because Rashi parallels these two, so why, just as with the river, why does Moses have Aaron also be the one to strike the dust of the earth and bring about the plague of lice? And the themes are similar. There's another reason, there's a reason of gratitude. What other instance, where was there an instance in Moses' life where the dust of the earth was used to save him?
Was it when he buried the taskmaster?
Yep.
Okay.
It's when he buried the body of the Egyptian taskmaster that he killed. After he caught the taskmaster about ready to beat one of his fellow Israelites to death, he jumped in and he beat the Egyptian taskmaster to death. And that's actually what was the catalyst for Moses then fleeing to Midian and bringing about the ire of Pharaoh. That's where he had to flee Pharaoh's household, because he was raised in Pharaoh's household, but then he had to flee, he was a fugitive. And that's sort of what kicked off the next stage of his journey in life, was he had to become a fugitive. And so it was the dust of the earth, literally, that he used to cover the body of the Egyptian taskmaster. So again, Moses was grateful because it allowed him, it bought him some time to get away and save his life. And so to show his gratitude, God didn't want him to be the one to also strike the earth. Now, Rashbam brings about, he brings about the discussion, another aspect of why would it be significant, especially for the first plague. Think about the first plague. You know, you're going to make that's where you're going to make a big impression. Like, okay, we're done playing around, and now we're going to start these various plagues. Why else would it be important for in the face of Pharaoh, for it to be Moses doing the proclaiming about the plague, but not the one to actually bring it about in the first? Rashbam leaves the question hanging, by the way, which means it's open to interpretation, but it makes you think about the scene. I have a couple of ideas. Here.
He's dealing with Moses. Moses is dealing with Pharaoh.
Okay.
So he wants him to still be able to be an intermediary, so he can't.
Because of Moses' position, Moses has to be the one to deal with Pharaoh, actually the one to deal with Pharaoh one-on-one. So God doesn't want Moses to all have to multitask and also have to worry about running back to the river and striking the thing. So exactly, I think what kind of this might allude to is it's sort of a quasi, I don't know if political is the right word or not, but it's a status thing. Moses has to show that, it's a way of demonstrating that Moses is in some way on an equal level, if not greater, of power and authority from that of Pharaoh. Because Pharaoh has, he's just like a good or bad monarch. He's got a whole litany of people who just says, go do this, go do that. And so it might not look well, it might not bode well if Moses was to be the one also having to roll up his sleeves and getting his hands dirty. So Moses needed somebody to say, go do this, go do that. If you're familiar with military history, we do not have, in the military, we do not have 5-star generals and 5-star admirals outside of very specific circumstances in war. The 5-star admiral, which is known as the fleet admiral, 5-star general. There have been very few 5-star generals. Eisenhower was a 5-star general, I believe. Was Patton?
No.
Patton was
3.
3 stars. Okay. But Eisenhower was. Why? the reason why that was brought about, and there's also the reason why the namesake of one of my former hometowns, Perrysburg, Ohio, Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, the War 1812, the Battle of 1812, who famously said, "We have met the enemy and they are ours," which gives me chills to think about it every time, because we don't talk like that anymore. It's a wonderful way of saying we won. But so we don't have naval ranks like commodores typically, and we don't usually have 5-star admirals and 5-star generals, except for in very specific circumstances. Why? Because our military, we needed to have military leadership of an equal rank to that of the enemy that we were fighting. We can't have our highest ranking officers outranked by anyone in the opposing armies. So we had to create an equal rank so that we had at least one or a couple high-ranking officers who were the rank equals of the enemy number. Because it wouldn't look good if everyone in our military was technically, in terms of rank, subordinate to the enemy. If that makes sense. So I think it's kind of the same thing with Moses and Aaron and with Pharaoh and his courtiers. Is that God had to make sure that Moses appeared to be at least on equal footing, if not greater, to Pharaoh. It wouldn't do for Moses to bring about the appearance of being a subordinate. If that makes sense.
I remember learning that the specific time of day, like so Pharaoh, going along with these kind of rankings, Pharaoh was seen by the people, the Egyptians, as a god.
Yes.
And so approaching Moshe with Aaron approaching Pharaoh at the Nile, it says, "Come to him in the morning." And I learned that the reason that was the significance of it is that Pharaoh would go to the bathroom in the morning at the Nile, or he would bathe and do stuff like that that was more human stuff.
Right.
Where God would be thought of as something like that. So everything that Pharaoh had to do that was human and get done for himself, taking care of his body and all that, was something that he would do early in the morning at the Nile. And so approaching him at this very sensitive part of the day, what he's doing is like he's at a human. He's not a god.
He's at his most human point.
Yes, and so Moshe's one of the ideas behind him approaching Pharaoh at that moment of time in the day at the Nile was to kind of highlight that he is actually not a god.
Right. Exactly. That's an important point, is that the pharaohs of Egypt were considered oftentimes living gods. They were the direct descendants of that's why some of them would adopt the names that involve certain things like Ra. Ra was the sun god of Egypt. And so sometimes they would deify themselves. But it was a way for God and for Moses to show Pharaoh's just a human being. Or in the words of Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, the opposite. When Drago talked about Rocky and said, "He is not a man, he is a machine." Whereas in Rocky's corner, they're like, "You made him bleed. Let's see, he's just a man. He's just a man. He can bleed. We can take him down." So yeah, I've heard that before. I don't remember where the source of the commentary is, but that's also a very true point. Is that it was a way of humanizing Pharaoh, because Pharaoh, was able to kind of put on his godly vestments. He would get up early in the morning, so no one was going to see him, and then he would do his human stuff, and then he would put on his godly garb and go about because they would paint themselves, and they had all sorts of they would decorate themselves, and so this was a way of sort of debasing and humanizing Pharaoh and knocking him down a couple of things.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the Egyptians believed that there was a god over the Nile.
Yes.
And the magicians couldn't undo what Aaron had done. All they could do is say, "Hey, we can do this too." So their gods weren't powerful enough to overcome what had happened to the Nile.
Right.
And I think that, to me, that's just very interesting.
And repeatedly throughout the narrative of this specific story, God, one of the reasons that God gives for the continuing plagues is to show the Egyptians that I am Adonai. I am God. And basically, parentheses, all of their gods are nothing.
Yeah.
They're nothing compared to me. And if you go back to even like the creation stories in the beginning of the Torah, in Parshat Bereshit, we have, so like the name for river, you have Nahar, or Yaor is the specific name of the Nile, but Nahar is a generic term for river, and Yam is the name we use for sea. In ancient Canaanite mythology, Nahar was the river god. Yam was the sea god. So the way that it's written in our sacred text is basically to say that these things, and to show that the creation story involves what? God conquering the forces of nature. What is chaos? The waters are running rampant, so God tames them. So it's actually sort of a polemic against this idea that there's other gods, or at least other gods that are as powerful as the God of the Israelites, because God controls all of them. God brought them under God's reign. God tamed them and put boundaries around them. So are they really gods at all? If our God can conquer them, but there's certainly not anything that should be worshipped over the God of Israel. So there's this repetition of this idea of God needing to prove God's self among the other people to show, depending on the time and the theology, whether or not you believe that there was a God of the river, just that God of the river was subservient to Adonai, or there was no God of the river, and really it was Adonai who is the creator of all, who controlled everything. So it's a theme that finds its place repeatedly throughout the Torah, and very prominently here, because the Egyptians they had a god of the river, they had their gods of various things, and so what are all the plagues involved with? Nature. In a polytheistic society, they're going to have these different deities that are in charge of these different aspects of nature. So this is God's way of saying, if I can do all of this, like here we said, and you can't undo any of it. Right. Clearly, you guys picked the wrong side. Because Adonai, God is really in control of all of us. And all of your preconceived notions about your deities, you might want to reassess. This was God flexing a little divine muscle.
Well, along those lines, another commentary that I was reading about the Parsha is, because we get to hail at the end of this Parsha, but it was fire and ice. And one of the things, there had separate gods for that too. Yeah. And the fact that you could bring those two gods together, which oppose each other, into an alliance, so to speak, with that plague, was a significant thing for Pharaoh to witness, I think, and ultimately ends up saying okay after that plague, but then obviously changed his mind again. Yeah, but one of those things that highlighting the one of the things that is that their gods can't reverse what I'm doing, but also now with the hail and fire, they combine two gods that oppose each other into an alliance that cannot normally happen.
Exactly. It's like, and how else could this happen if I wasn't, God of all?
Right.
You guys couldn't even do this. So what is that? Again, so that's another very interesting point, is that you have these two juxtaposed forces of nature: fire and ice, heat and cold. And normally we think of them as diametrically opposed. And what does God do? God brings them together in partnership. He uses them together. They don't cancel each other out.
And that would be the first plague that is using natural things that wouldn't naturally be together.
Yeah. You could argue whether or not could it be out of the ordinary, or is God kind of fudging the laws of nature just without outright breaking them? But it's enough to show where people of the time would look at that and go, that's not supposed to happen. Maybe we need to do some thinking about our position on this whole God of the Israelites versus our God, letting the Israelites go, because if that's not anything Pharaoh's magician could ever do, that's not anything any of our supposed deities have ever been able to do, so, it would give one pause for thought, I would think, except for Pharaoh, who pauses for all of 5 minutes and then he reverses his position and goes back to being hard-hearted.
Yeah.
What do you guys make of that, by the way? This is a question that gets brought up a lot, because it talks about, at some points it says Pharaoh's heart hardened, or Pharaoh hardened his heart. Other times God says, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. There's a bit of an inconsistency there.
Yeah.
Or is it?
This is something else that I read about too.
What?
So the word is, in some cases, is vayetezak, which is strength.
Yeah.
So the question was, would come up is how could God take the free will of a human? That's opposed to everything that we
Exactly.
believe. And the argument using the word vayetezek as strength is that God is actually giving Pharaoh in those moments strength to resist on purpose, rather than he's giving him courage in a way to resist, so that because no normal human would resist, but in order for the purpose of the plagues to have the effect that they need, God needs to give strength to Pharaoh in some instances to continue the plan.
Right, but without negating Pharaoh's free will.
Right, yeah. So most normal human beings would not have gone as far as he did with all of these plagues.
Yeah, as soon as you turn sticks into snakes, I'm done.
Yeah, right. So it'll be different for everybody, but he needs to, there's an ultimate plan here with going through the plagues and those things that no normal person would have wanted to go through all that, probably.
And it's specifically because God understands human nature that God realizes that, unless I'm kind of nudging Pharaoh a little bit, being like, come on, you can do this, you guys are stronger.
So it was an interesting, it was using the phrases that are used in the Torah.
Yeah.
In this case, it's strength. But there's another phrase that you use, like I think you were mentioning.
Yeah, to harden. I think it's similar to the cover.
Yeah, cover. Yeah.
So okay, that's
There's two words that are being used in the same kind of phrase, same idea. Where God is affecting Pharaoh's thought process.
Right.
In two different ways.
And the kaveh can be used for when Pharaoh decides to harden his own heart, like he's gonna. God has kind of given him the sense of false confidence. And rather than listening to his deeper intuition, which was probably screaming at him to run, screaming the other direction, Pharaoh goes, "Nah, we can beat these little piddly Israelites," and hardens his own heart. So he's listening to this little nudge that God is giving him, because God kind of has the long game in mind. In order for this to have the full effect, we need to get through all 10 of these plagues, and everyone needs to see it, because I don't want to leave any doubt in anyone's mind about what's going on. That's not going to happen if we hadn't gone through all of that. If Moses and Aaron would have gone and presented their case very strongly to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh went, okay, this would be a pamphlet.
Well, Raul, I read a commentary where it said that, in the sense that the Egyptians looked at Pharaoh as a god,
Yes.
that his primary responsibility was order.
Yes.
And what Moses was doing through Hashem is disrupting the order. So, in all of the plagues, things went completely out of whack. And the blame is all on Pharaoh. I mean, the Egyptian people would say he's not acting like a god.
Right.
So what would happen is when the blood stopped flowing through the Nile, order had been restored. And so, the pressure was off of him, if you will, from the Egyptian people, and he could think of himself as okay again. And that would be a hardening of his heart. In other words, his ego, I've got order back restored, and everything's going to be okay. Anyway.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind with that. One, from 20th century history, the turning point in the Eastern or the European theater of the war was the Nazis continuing to plow into the Soviet Union, and where they got turned around finally was after the Battle of Stalingrad, which, if you've ever read any history on it, was horrific. And when the rubble was, when the Nazis were driven back, were being driven back towards Germany, the fact that there were any people alive in the rubble, let alone about 10,000 people who remained in the city during all that and were alive, living throughout all that, is absolutely remarkable, given the fact that 20 million Russians were killed during the war. But they went through not one but two winters. I've never been through a Soviet or a Russian winter. I've heard stories about it, and I know I don't want to.
Yeah.
You know, and so what happened was they got to Stalingrad. The Nazi army was ill-equipped to survive. They were used to German winters, normal European winters, but they weren't used to the Arctic tundra that much of Russia lived in, and including where Stalingrad is by the fork of the Don and Volga River. And so they had the first winter, which just demoralized them. Many people froze and starved to death. And they were on top of that, they were weakened. They were being decimated by the Soviets, as well as by Soviet partisans, including those who lived among the rubble, who were kind of engaging in guerrilla warfare against the Nazis. And then what happened? Spring came, and they naturally forgot all about their troubles in the winter. They said, "Okay,
Yeah.
it's over.
Right.
Now that it's warm out, now we'll be okay, and now we'll win, and then we'll finish our conquest of the Eastern Front." Well, they forgot just how belligerent the Soviets were. Literally, you're talking in Stalingrad. There was the barricading ironworks where they were literally they were building tanks there, and they were rolling these tanks off the assembly line, unpainted, out to the front. Like people from the factory would just roll them out to the front and engage in the battle until some soldiers could take over. Like this is how belligerent the Soviets were.
Yeah.
And so they doggedly kept the fight and defended against the Nazi siege. And guess what happened? Winter happened again. And this was the winter where Field Marshal Linus Paulus, the head of the Sixth Army, eventually was forced against orders from Berlin to concede defeat and surrender the Sixth Army to the Soviets because they got cocky. Their ego got a boost from surviving that winter barely, and they forgot all about it. So Pharaoh would forget about every time the play would end.
Yeah.
And I think we've all had some sort of instance of that when we're in a situation. We might even say that little prayer to God, be like, "You just get me through this.
Yeah.
I swear I'll never do X, Y, and Z again." And then it ends, and you're like, "Oh, never mind, we're fine." You know. So you get that sense of relief that washes over, and we allow that to kind of erase our memories a little bit, and we think, "Okay, I'm past it. I don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't have to learn my lessons." Fortunately, sometimes we throw that reprieve away, and we end up getting it even worse the second or third time around.
Yeah.
Thoughts to the Parsha this week? Action-packed, as Josh said. It's very action-packed. It's heavy, heavy action. It's like one of the many battle scenes in the Lord of the Rings books and movies. Just one after another. What could possibly happen next? Well, tune in next week.
Right.
Because we're going to keep it right up. We're not done yet. All right, guys. In that case, well, should go up to you guys. Those who brought the questions and the comments and all that. All right, we are going to continue with the conclusion of our service on page 182, Inka Hinu.
Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Moshiach, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonai, Atahu Maheinu, Atahu Masheinu, Atahu Setiru, Atahu Hoseinu, Lefanecha.
183.
Shalom, Asanu Kekoy Harapso, Velo Samanu Mishpaha, Shalom, Samanu Kekoy, Velo Aleinu Kekoy, Vananu Kori, Umashati, Umori, Likehema, Emalaki, Akahosh Baruch
This week, Temple Israel commemorates the yard sites of the following. Today, the 16th, is the yard site of Gladys Kaufman. January 17th, is the yard sites of Leo Bear, Leonard Collins, and Sheila White. 18th, yard sites of Hyman Krieger and Esther Sarah Mayers. The 19th is the yard site of Anna Gornstein. The 20th is the yard sites of Jerome K. Borak, Joel Cohen, Sadie Falk, Anna Gross, Robert Jolton, Yetta Myers, and Bill Plotkin. And January 21st is the yard site of Isaac Semiak. Are there any of the yard sites coming up this week? Yard sites. And as always, we do remember the members of our congregational family who passed away in the previous year and their loved ones. Ori Ben Chaya, Frederick Violet, Irma Wallen, Henry Gutman, Larry Grodman, Harold Gross, Libby Kuchar, Stephen Rosenberg, Alfreda Meyerson Rudman, and we are also sad to announce the passing of our longtime member on this past Wednesday, Stephen Silverberg. As well, I don't have their names, but also would like to add to our list of deceased the two U.S. Capitol police officers who died as a result of the violence engaged by some fringe members of the protest group that gathered and decided to storm the Capitol. One of whom was killed on the spot, was beaten to death and died later with injuries. And the other who survived without any physical scratches, but unfortunately, it seems that the psychological implications were a little too much for what happened. A day or so after the Capitol storming, he committed suicide. So, I mentioned last night to those who were in attendance, there's professions like police and first responders and other professions like medical professions, doctors, nurses. There's a lot of things that we don't understand about those professions that's been done for a while. There's a lot of psychological stresses, and there's certain professions that have higher rates of various issues. So, when we talk about, do the Misha Barak, I talk about asking God to tend to those who tend to the ill. It's an invitation for us to think about all those different people who work those professions, and rather selflessly so, trying to do their part to seek the greater good. And it's a reminder to us to do what we can to help take care of them in turn, because that's the question. Who takes care of those who take care of us? So we should not forget them and the multitude of sacrifices that they make on a daily basis. Ask all those in mourning, all those observing the yard site, all those who wish to do so, please rise. Please turn to page 184, the Kaddish Tom Moore's Couch. Yitzgadal, Yitzgadal, Shnei Rabba, Yamani Brak Yotei, Yamit Mafutei, L'chayekon Yamecho, U'chayeh L'chol Beit Yisrael, La'ala, Uzman Kariv, Imru Amen,
Shnei Rabba,
Rabba, Yitbarak, Yishtabak, Yitbar, Yishman, ושבו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה ונרם ועמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה לחיים עלינו יעקב ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום עמה הוא יעשה שלום עלינו יעקב ישראל ויעקב תבל ואמרו amen. May their memories always be for us. Just some quick announcement before we conclude with the Don't Along on 187. We do like to share in our happy tidings as well, our simchas. We have birthdays coming up this week. 18th is the birthday of Lisa Howe. We have many birthdays to report on the 19th. Rainey Brenner, who continues to improve with her cancer treatment, so she's doing well with that. Thank God. Peter Halleck. Nadav Matthews has a birthday that day as well. Woo! And last night, Nadav and Mitchell Weinberg found out their birthday buddies. Mitchell Weinberg also has a birthday on the 19th. And Benny Clement this week for birthdays on the 21st. Nathaniel Davidow has his birthday that day. Zelto. Let's see. Again, no other mazel tovs to announce. Condolences again go to the family of Stephen Silverberg on his passing, and it was, from what we understand, was rather unexpected. Per his wishes, no formal announcements of any sort, including obituaries, are going to be published. However, the family said we can absolutely include his name on our list of yard sites and mention his name in that capacity. Let's see. Well, first, thank you everyone for coming and making sure that we had a minyan, we got Shiri Torah. Thank you to many for waiting the entire Torah reading today. Yeshua Koach to you. Always lovely to hear you back in action with Yad in hand. Yeshua Koach to President Josh Nathan for chanting the Haftarah today for us as well. And a big thanks as always to our lay-led security team, Steve Sullivan, Matthews, and Lee Musikoff, along with our, I don't know his name out there, but the gentleman from the company who was also assisting us from a professional capacity, ensuring that we are safe, secure, and sound here in our house of worship. So thank you guys for that. We continue to do, because you guys also do continued education and training for that. Make sure that you're staying in practice. So thank you. End of the month, last Friday of the month, January 29th, is a Friday night, 6 p.m. Why did I mention that? Because that is our next family Shabbat with goodies to go.
Yeah, so we're having, it's going to be an Israeli-themed dinner take-home.
Ooh.
Definitely register.
It's
It's from Levine's again. And you can piggyback kosher food orders too.
Yes, that's another thing. If anyone wants to order kosher food from Levine's, is it Levine's?
Yeah.
Okay. It is possible when ordering, because that's who we order from, if you would like to order other kosher items to stock up in your home, that's an opportunity to do it. Just make sure you come and pick up your stuff. But we can piggyback that way. That way it's easier instead of thinking about trying to plan a day to schlep down to either Peabody or Brooklyn, depending on where you want to go, to procure kosher meat and whatever else. We can have it brought here because we're doing a big enough order. So, so I take it there'll be shawarma then?
It's going to be some sort of grilled chicken. But there's also going to be a vegetarian.
I am totally down. Okay. Bless you.
Really?
All right. So that's going to be January 29th at 6 p.m. It will be live streamed for those joining us at home. RSVP is necessary for those who are going to come in physical attendance, so we know how many dinners to purchase. And then the very next day.
That hasn't gone out yet, but it's going to go out this week.
Okay. So the information for that will go out this week. Just front loading it now. And then the 30th, the last Saturday of the month, is going to be our next in-person and live stream Shabbat morning service. So please RSVP for that as well. So we can make sure we have a minyan.
Splitting of the sea, more action.
Yes, more action coming. Parshat Beshalach. We're going to be, speaking of conquering bodies of water, now we're going to be splitting an entire sea in half so the Israelites can pass through. Will they make it?
There are lots of complaining too.
There's lots of catching. That's lots of catching where we basically figure out that it's basically tradition. Why do the Jews complain so much? Tradition!
Tradition.
Tradition. And an email went out, by the way, there's going to be a three-part adult ed series starting last Tuesday of this month, January 26th at 6 p.m. For a three-part series on the origins of and history and philosophy and the process involved with the conservative movement. So it's basically all you ever wanted to know about conservative Judaism and more, including the very interesting history behind how we have this idea of movements within Judaism and how that happened. Now, one thing that goes back in Hallel history, while the movements are modern, Jews disagreeing on interpretation of the Torah and its application is not. So, some things may change, others stay the same. Carol?
What's the time in your course?
6 p.m. 6 p.m. is going to be it starts Tuesday, January 26th, and then it goes, and then the following 2 Tuesdays after that going into February, we'll also be meeting. Each class is, I'm budgeting about an hour. I'm going to make sure that people aren't staying online too long in front of Zoom, but we're keeping it moving and it's engaging. And I'm having a lot of fun with the PowerPoint presentation. So there's a lot of
good.
Yeah, Josh has got a sneak preview already. So there's a lot of, I'm finding some really great old photographs that to bring in to introduce to really bring this all to life. So
the link is going to be sent out. It hasn't been sent out.
It hasn't been sent out yet. Now, I will be sending the Zoom link out. I'll get that set up and that will go out to the congregation. It's free. There's no charge, no cost, and you don't need to buy any materials. Everything will be provided. So just bring your thirst for knowledge. That's all you need. All right. That being said, wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Stay dry and stay warm out there.